Okay, welcome to Worcester Voices, a series of conversations with people who live, work, and study and create in Worcester. I'm Lena.
I'm Maria.
We are students at Holy Cross. For our third episode, we're joined by Frank Kartheiser, class of 1972, co-founder of the Mustard Seed, a Catholic worker house and soup kitchen. Frank, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here with you.
All right, so we're first interested in your time at Holy Cross. So it's our understanding that you had quite a unique experience stumbling upon Holy Cross. Can you tell us about that story?
I went to like an all-male Catholic high school in Chicago, and that went pretty well for me. So I looked around for a Catholic all-male college, and that's how I found Holy Cross. My two big goals coming out here from Chicago were to play football and have fun. So I hope your goals were a little higher than mine.
What was it like coming to Holy Cross as a football player when you did? And is there anything prominent that was different then versus now?
Well, the biggest thing is what I just said is it was an all-male school. So I think it's certainly a better college now than when I came here, I would say. I think the women have had a tremendous impact. But the other part of it was, I'd never been out here. My dad put me on a plane in Chicago, and I landed in Boston, and I didn't know what to do. I walked out looking for a bus or something like that, and there was a cab driver. I said, where's Worcester? He said, oh, come on, I'll take you there. So that's how and then he drives me, brings me up on this hill, drops me off up at Hogan, and I get out of the taxi cab and I walk over to the steps and I sit down and said, what in the world have I done? Here I am on a hill. I don't know anybody for 1,000 miles. What's this all about? But it's worked out great. It's been a great experience.
We also understand through reading about you that you decided to leave Holy Cross in your junior year, if I'm correct, to live with the O'Brien family and start your Mustard Seed journey. So for our listeners, could you tell us what the Mustard Seed is and what your inspiration behind starting that was?
Yeah, let me go back to your other point, though. So it was my junior year, and a lot of what was happening up here was the Vietnam War and the anti-war movement. And I knew a friend that I played ball with in Chicago, who didn't go to college and got drafted, went to boot camp, and then got sent to Vietnam. And 3 months later, he came home in a bag. He was dead. And here I am screwing around on the side of a hill in Worcester. And it just, that was, Bob's death was kind of my wake-up call, like, what is going on? And so I started to pay attention to what was going on in the world. And then, like you said, in my junior year, I said, I can't keep going to school while all this is going on. So I dropped out. And it was just sheer luck that night that I dropped out, midway through junior year. There was a Catholic Peace Fellowship meeting downtown. So I went to the meeting, and Dr. Dave O'Brien was there. And he said to me, what are you doing? I said, oh, I just dropped out of school. He said, oh, would you like to live with me and my family? I'm like, yeah. That would be great. So I was fortunate enough. They lived back on the other side of the hill back in Auburn. And I just had a great year there of getting to know them. And to be honest with you, I had gone to Catholic school my whole life. And in just those 7 or 8 months with the O'Briens, I learned more about Catholicism and the Catholic faith than I learned in the, previous 15 years about Catholicism. So it was a real gift, a great gift.
Interesting. What was your inspiration behind the Mustard Seed idea?
Again, from Dave and Joanne O'Brien, learning about Catholicism, I learned about the Catholic worker movement that was started in New York City in the Bowery in 1933. So I learned about it and started to look a little more into what was happening. And I was doing some anti-war work. I did some counseling of guys who were struggling with heroin. You know, I did a few different things in the community, but I just felt like I needed to make a bigger commitment. So I got a hold of a friend of mine who had graduated from Holy Cross, Sean Donovan, and my girlfriend who became my wife, Brenda Norton. And the three of us got talking, and we said, why don't we do this? Why don't we open a Catholic worker house here and see how that goes? And we just thought that was a great idea. So we rented a storefront on Pleasant Street. And I remember the first time we're there, we're sitting down there thinking, what are we gonna call this place? And Sean walks in and says, we're gonna call it the Mustard Seed. I said, what? He said, yeah, that's what we're gonna call it. And I said, that sounds like a hippie boutique or something. What do you mean? He said, no, it's biblical. Do you know the biblical passage for the mustard seed?
Of course.
Yes. So he said, well, what was I going to do? Fight with him? No. So we called it the mustard seed, and people just started to come in. I can remember there was a priest here, Father Joe LeBran, and he was bringing Holy Cross students down. But also people were coming in off the street. And the first woman to come in, she knocked on the door, came in, and she said, what are you doing here? I said, I don't know. What should we do? She said, well, get some coffee. You got to have coffee. So we got a coffee pot, and then we got a burner. You know, we started serving food, and it just started like that.
Wow.
Could you tell us what like a typical day at the Mustard Seed looks like?
What it looks like now,
Yes,
rather than the old days. Yeah. So just how we got, so the storefront, we were in this storefront on Pleasant Street for about a year. And, we managed to piss off the landlord, so we had to leave. So there was people raising money for us, and we raised enough money for a down payment on Piedmont Street. And that was a 3-decker at the time. So we moved over there, and, people just started to come there. And so what we did first was just to have a nightly meal, and that still continues. So the Mustard Seed is 50-something years old, and we've been doing a meal every weekday night since then. And but also now it's much more maybe routine. People will come a little bit early for the meal and get clothes or toiletries. We have a food pantry on Tuesday nights, things like that. And so on the night that I'm in on Tuesday, we have the food pantry, and then people come in for the meal. And people in Worcester are so generous. We don't do the meals. There's churches, synagogues, mosques, community groups that have taken a certain night, the second Tuesday, the third Wednesday, and they cook all the meals and bring them in and share them. It's tremendous. And there's a good community that we have that are part of what we're doing there and that feel comfortable coming in for the meal and breaking bread together.
You mentioned some resources and different amenities that you guys have over at the Mustard Seed, like the food and the toiletries if they need it. What else do you guys have available to the people who come to you guys?
Yeah, so I'm glad we have the food pantry. We really don't want families to come in. We don't want kids to have dinner. So we have the food pantry so that families can come in. That's Tuesday, Wednesday. We also have the toiletries that you mentioned. We have a medical clinic on Mondays. So, different things like that. And the groups that will bring food in, they'll bring other kind of, things just to help out, clothing and whatnot. So it really runs pretty smooth that way.
How have you as a co-founder watched the Mustard Seed grow and develop over the years, and kind of like what's your biggest takeaway from it?
Mm-hmm. Initially, when we were doing it and there were all kinds of families coming in, we decided to do housing. So we started to use part of the building that we were in for housing. And then we realized that we stunk at housing. We just didn't do a good job. Partly all the people at the mustard seed are volunteers. There's no paid staff. And so it was really hard to put that on a volunteer basis. And the housing piece just brought in a lot of problems, the place was open 24/7. Things were going all the time. We were always trying to, I'll give you an example. I woke up one night and went downstairs, and one of the guys was cooking a hot dog, which was nice, except he was using a plastic bowl. You know what I mean? So it was just, you had to pay attention all the time. So we kind of did away with the housing piece and focused on other things that were more routine. But like I say, when you have 100 people for dinner every night, you can kind of upset your neighbors. And so what we've done in the last 7 or 8 years is we've opened up a summer camp so that the kids in our neighborhood, for the month of July, we have 20 to 30 kids from the neighborhood who, spend the day with us, and we do field trips. We do some academics, but even just Worcester's great like that, even for just getting around to the art museum or, all the different places that you can go that some kids in the neighborhood wouldn't get a chance to go to. Or sometimes we could even, road trip, you know what I mean? Do stuff like that.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know you guys included the kids like that too and did the camp. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm personally curious if you have any favorite memories or funny stories from your journey or time at the Mustard Seed.
Well, all of those memories are pretty. Some are pretty scary and some are pretty fun. But I think mostly what I think about, what attracts me is, when we first started, it was mostly a soup kitchen, but quickly it became more of a community, more of folks coming together to help each other out, to learn about what some of the challenges were. I get concerned nowadays because a lot of young people come and they're dealing with drugs and they've dropped out of school, or, the young people I really worry about because, I don't know, they just seem to be struggling. And so that's a big concern about how do we think with them. But outside of that group, most of the people who come are regulars. So we have that sense of community and being able to help each other out, and also to be invited to get to know each other better, which is, a gift for all of us.
But what are some challenges and setbacks that you guys have faced over the years?
Opening it up, really not having a clue about what we were doing was a good thing, because it helped us just sit back and go with what folks who came in, what were they looking, where could we be helpful? And then finding all these people who just helped us out. I mean, at the storefront, even on Pleasant Street, one of the monks from the monastery, he was actually a hermit. The hermit shows up at our door with all these vegetables. Well, how many times you get a hermit at your front door? And he was growing out in Spencer at St. Joseph's Abbey. He was growing vegetables, and he harvested them and brought them to the mustard seed just to share with people so that people could have it. So things like that were happening all the time. And I think I mentioned that different groups take a certain night. Well, that doesn't happen just overnight, but, folks start stepping forward. What can I do? And you say, well, would you cook the meal on Tuesdays, the first Tuesday, or things like that? And people have always stepped up. I mean, how do you stay alive for over 50 years with no paid staff, with all volunteers? It's because the generosity of the people of Worcester, the consistency and persistence of people who want to help out. It's a great gift.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't
That's
it?
incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of us who don't know, could you tell us about the 2 feet of Christian service that you mentioned and how your mustard seed lives that out?
Yeah. So for me, the opening the mustard seed up and having people come was great. It was a great gift, and getting to meet people and dealing with the challenges. But then a terrible thing happened. The line at the soup kitchen started getting longer and longer. It's not what I had in mind. It wasn't what I was thinking. A group of people, we'd come and get together and help each other out and work our way through this. And that was pretty discouraging to me, going to your 2 feet. One of the 2 feet is the work of charity, which is what the mustard seed is about. And so the charity was sharing what we had, what we got, we would share with people. But not long into it, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts decided to shut down all of the state hospitals. Do you know what a state hospital is? State hospital is for folks who are struggling with mental illness. So they closed all of the state hospitals. There was one right here in Worcester up on Belmont Street. And so those people started to come to the line. Well, these were people who wore winter clothes in the summer clothes in the winter. They were struggling, and we didn't know how to help them, what we could do for them. So trying to care for folks like that. And then veterans from the Vietnam War, guys who fought in Vietnam came home, all messed up, PTSD, drugs. And so caring for those guys. So you see what I'm getting at? The line kept getting longer. Well, that wasn't my intention or our intention. A soup kitchen in the richest country in history is an embarrassment. The fact that the mustard seed is 50-something years old is great on one side, but on the other side, it's what? What do you mean? And so shutting it down is something that would be kind of my vision. I don't say it too often because people get mad at me, but running ourselves out of business, that it would be that a soup kitchen isn't necessary in Worcester would be part of the vision I would have. But I understand that we still need to do that kind of work. But from charity, we have to move on to the other shoe, which is justice. And justice is about getting to the root cause. And what is the root cause of hunger, of soup kitchen show? How do you get to the root cause? And for me, that had to do with community organizing. So I was still volunteering at the Mustard Seed, but with some other faith groups and people in Worcester, we put together a broad-based community organization called Worcester Interfaith. And interfaith was a way for us to identify what poor and low-income families were dealing with here in Worcester, and then how could we come together to respond to those challenges. And I just want to tell one story, just a picture about that second foot of justice. We decided, 8, 9 years ago, I retired from Worcester Interfaith a while back, but we decided that we needed to increase the minimum wage. The minimum wage at the time was $11 an hour. So if you're making if you're a mother with a couple of kids and you're working a minimum wage job, you're bringing in about $20,000. Well, that means you get to work your tail off to live in poverty, basically, is what it means. So we were able to get a ballot initiative where people signed on, and we could look at increasing the minimum wage, and we voted for that. So on January 1st of 2024, the minimum wage in Massachusetts reached $15 an hour. Now, that's not a tremendous, but you're making $32,000. And that's how Worcester Interfaith trying to think about how do we get to the root cause of the problem.
I didn't know you did that work as well.
You spoke a lot about how faith impacted, your journey to creating the mustard seed and your community service. Could you talk a little bit about how faith impacts your life still now?
I think for me, it's always been a struggle. It's not a simple thing. I'm a faithful person, and I care about religion and the values of our faith for Catholicism. But I will say I always struggle with doubt, and sometimes the soup kitchen will fill me with doubt. What the hell is going on here? Why is this happening? Why can't we do better? And that's not always a question of faith, obviously, but it is certainly always, I think, a question of service. That we've all, I think we all try to be of service to those in our community who are struggling. And how do we do that? And what's the impact? Is it helping? Is it hurting? And then that always brings in, for me, questions about faith and where it fits in our lives.
What is an area or an aspect of your work that brings you excitement? Like, what do you look forward to in your days?
I think the biggest thing goes back to community organizing is when low-income, poor families start coming together and recognizing their strength as a community, as a group, and step up to leadership and move into action around those kinds of challenges. I mean, again, when you talk about my faith is in each other as well as in God, and that people have this innate kind of understanding, love of self and love of one another, and recognizing their capacity to improve our lives and, mostly just run the mustard seed out of business.
What are some of your biggest inspirations and means of support now?
Like people who support you, people who inspire your journey too.
So have you been down to the mustard seed?
I visited with one of my classes, yeah.
And how'd that feel?
It was great. I thought it was inspiring.
Yes. Well, now you know how I feel. Yeah, always miraculously people show up. And people have been talking about this a bit now. For you as students and we talk about service, being of service. And people have talked more lately about service being kind of the pathway. And in that pathway, it leads to a big room where the community is gathered. So we have our journeys, maybe our individual journeys or service, but it isn't for us to stay isolated. It's for us to be able to understand, to learn, and then to join together with other folks to have an impact. I call this the wealthiest country in history. I look around and I say, we got to do better. We can do better.
I like that. Do you have like a certain or particular moment that you're really proud of? Like a really I made it moment?
I think that mostly the I made it, the ones that come to mind is really kind of we made it. Because what it's about for me is community and coming together. If it were something that I could do by myself, I would just say by definition, it's not that big. Because there's nothing that I can do that by myself that can have that impact. So my excitement is around, like I was saying, the work of service is the journey to community. That community, it seems to me, is a natural outcome of our work of serving one another and being of service to each other.
before you were talking about how you were able to raise minimum wage up to $15, which is amazing. Are there any other projects that are more current that you'd like to talk about?
Well, all of them are current because they're always in different states. But since I retired, I'm less engaged with them. But what I appreciate about them is they run the gamut of what would you say, kind of the struggles of inner cities for inner city families, especially young families and immigrant families, that people come here with such joy and excitement, and it's struggle. It's a battle, and it's those kinds of bringing people together, of challenging each other to build a better world, and to be able to identify it even in small ways, because those baby steps are what lead to the bigger kind of changes, and those are the tools for learning. And for me, that requires me to be in connection with people who are experiencing those challenges, but willing to step up and make a change. And a lot of people have stepped up just by being here, just by coming to this country.
As a former Holy Cross student yourself, do you have any advice for some current students?
I have, one, what would you call it? Kind of one effort that I think about. Even when I came here, Holy Cross was not that connected to the city of Worcester. I don't know if you've had this experience. When I first came, I just walked off the hill. I almost got killed at the bottom of College Street with all the river there, and I almost got killed. But I just went walking until I got lost. That was my goal. And I just kind of fell in love with Worcester, of just finding my way around. Growing up in Chicago, Chicago's a grid. You take three lefts and you go in a circle. Here, you take three lefts and you don't know where the hell you are. You take three turns, you don't know what direction you're going in. So that was that I always enjoyed that experience of just being lost in Worcester. And then the neighborhood, partly what I see for the college, Holy Cross has always been a little bit too hilly, too close to the hill. And I've been excited. I've been working with some professors here and some students to think about Quinsig Village, to think about the neighborhoods around, and to see what ways we can connect better. Because for me, leaving this hill and moving into the, dropping out of school and moving into the community, that's where my energy came from, partly getting off the hill.
Yeah, definitely. How can students and the Worcester community get involved in the Mustard Seed?
Oh, that's easy. You just show up. Yeah, don't worry about a thing. Just kind of come on down. And my hope for that, too, and it's difficult for students, the Mustard Seed is a few miles away, and so it's not a walkable thing. But, people kind of Uber down and Uber back. It'd be great to see students more just walking over, or however, where there's connections with Worcester and with the neighborhoods and with the Mustard Seed, which would be great. And I think also, too, it's not just about the Mustard Seed. I think the things that I listed out, the meal, the clothing, the kids, the medical center, the food pantry, those are all great things. And there's a lot of other organizations doing some good work. And I think, I don't know, do you have conversations about volunteering or about service, or, do other names come up besides the Mustard Seed?
Yeah, at least in my Montserrat, I'm not sure about yours, but Montserrat's like our freshman course. We do community-based learning programs where we go to the the Montserrat, or we go to like little churches or little nonprofits and we go volunteer there. So I do know the mustard seed's part of that list.
That's great. That's great. For you, Maria?
My Montserrat is an English class, so we don't do a lot of that, but I kind of wish we did because it seems really fun.
It's been great to get out into the community and actually like help the people that we live with, for sure, instead of being isolated on like the hill. Getting to know the Worcester community is really nice.
Where are you from, Lena?
I'm from Tampa, Florida, so I'm far.
That's a great travel.
I'm from Long Island, New York.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's great. Well, welcome to Worcester. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess just a little wrap-up question here. Looking forward to the future, what are your plans? Do you have anything in mind?
I'm really excited about this summer camp, with the neighborhood kids. Really excited about, just a little more about that is because it's all volunteers, because it's that meal every night and all that other stuff, there was always this focus inside the mustard seed, kind of in the building. And so I'm appreciating connecting with our neighbors and with this focus of being outside the building. So my hope is to continue kind of growing that part of it and seeing where these kids, where have we been able to be impactful? What else do we need to be doing? And then, so I think of our next step is how do we be more neighborly? And where does that fit? It's good stuff that we're doing in the building, and our guests are grateful, and that will continue. And then it's also where else can we be of service?
You mentioned this before that people can always get involved, but what can the audience do to like learn more or engage more with the mustard seed?
Oh, I think the first thing you got to do is come on down. I think that's first. And I'd suggest even you don't have to say that you're there. Just come on down and have dinner, all right? The food might be a little better than what's on the hill even, So I'd say come on down and just have dinner. I think that would be, not tell anyone, just check it out and share, break bread. I understand that a lot of students might come down and think they're stealing a meal. Mm. Yeah, there's too many meals that stealing one wouldn't matter anyway. But coming down and just breaking bread with people, and I'd be interested in just hearing your reactions to something like that and what you learned from that. You know what I mean? Helping out the service piece, you already do that, I'm sure, and there's other ways that you could do it. And the mustard seed could just be testing a different strain in what the world is looking like.
Well, we just want to thank you again for being here and talking to us on Worcester Voices. I've really enjoyed getting to hear how you saw a need and had an inspiration and got to take action towards that. It's really incredible.
I wish I could do that when I'm older.
Well, thank you, ladies. I appreciated the opportunity.
Yes.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you would want to add, or did we cover everything?
No, I think you covered most of it. Yes.
Good.
Okay. For our listeners, I want to remind you that community is something that we create together when we stay curious, lead with compassion, and choose connection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.